Welcome to True Drew Podcast, your source for all things Nancy Drew. I'm your host, Avery, and on this podcast, we'll discuss everything from the Nancy Drew books, to computer games, to movie adaptations, and TV shows. Nothing is off the table. So if you're a True Drew, you'll definitely want to tune in for this podcast. Hello, Nancy Drew fans of the world. I hope you guys are having a great day. I'm actually recording this on a Saturday, so I'm having a great time. I know these episodes come out on Thursdays, but that's the cool thing about having a podcast. You can record your episodes whenever you kind of feel like it. So I had some free time this weekend. I got some stuff done around my house, took some Nancy Drew books that I sold to the post office, and right now I'm getting ready to record this episode, and I've actually got a face mask on right now. I hope I don't forget and reach up and touch it because it's one of those that comes out of a bottle, and so you just kind of put it on your face. It's not one of those sheet masks. So yeah, because self-care, I like to take care of my skin when I have time, and I guess I'll know when to take this off when my face starts getting really stiff and it gets harder to talk. So it's also a great day today because we're going to be talking about a Nancy Drew book that one of the Nancy Drew PC games is based off of, and that book is The Haunted Carousel, which is number 72 in the Nancy Drew series, and it first came out in 1983. So the book, The Haunted Carousel, and the computer game, The Haunted Carousel, there are some similarities, mostly in a few of the characters' names and the fact that we're talking about this carousel horse that's gone missing, but there's a lot of differences too. I would say that this book is only about 20 to 25% like the game, just in my own personal opinion. So first, let's go ahead and discuss some of the covers that I found for The Haunted Carousel. There are two that I want to talk about today. And if you want to check these out, they're also up on my Instagram, True Drew Podcast. So this first book cover edition is the one that I have in my own personal collection. The book is red, and Nancy herself is actually wearing a red sweatshirt and some high-waisted jeans, and she's in what looks like a really cluttered basement. There's a lot of cobwebs, there's what looks like a mirror in the background, and there's a shadow of a man's profile on the wall, his face. You can see his nose and his chin, and that's really creepy. But not a carousel or a carousel horse in sight. So I like this cover a little bit, but it doesn't really scream The Haunted Carousel to me as much as this second cover does. So this second cover edition, which looks like it was redone in the 90s at some point, shows Nancy on a very light pink book, which I really like, and she's wearing the high-waisted jeans, a tank top, which is under a button-down shirt, which she kind of has open but tucked into those jeans, and there's this solid black carousel horse behind her, and Nancy's holding on to the pole of the carousel, and it's kind of at an angle, which is really cool. And the tagline for this says, "Suspense rides a merry-go-round and takes Nancy for a spin." And the funny cover spoof that I came up with for the first cover is just Nancy Drew in the overly cluttered basement, because I don't know why you would have a book called The Haunted Carousel and you wouldn't include a carousel or a carousel horse in some aspect. That was a wasted opportunity, I think. So when it comes to giving these book covers a rating, I would give the first one a 3 to 3.5 magnifying glasses and the second one a 4. I really like the second cover edition from the 90s way better than the first. So now let's go ahead and jump into discussing some of the characters we see in The Haunted Carousel. So of course we have Bess and George. They tag along with Nancy on this mystery. Ned comes in at certain points. And then we have some of Bess and George's relatives, and they're called the Custer children. I think there's 3 kids, and their names are Billy, Janet, and Gary. There's also a Rick Jason, who's a reporter for the River Heights News, Conrad and Trudy Tromple, who are this Swiss couple that are visiting River Heights, Leo Novak, who owns the carousel at this theme park in River Heights, Officer Doyle and Detective Norris, which are some police officers that Nancy deals with in the book, Fingers Malone and Baldy Krebs, and I just put bad guys in parentheses, Arno Franz, who is an expert on carousels, Neil Sawyer, who's an engineer and friend of George's, Walter Cruz, who was an artist who worked on carousels, Joy Trent, who is an heiress, and you'll recognize her name from the Haunted Carousel game, Aunt Selma Yawley, who's Joy's aunt, and John and Iris Trent, who were Joy's parents who have since passed away. Okay, so really quickly, I'll go ahead and read a synopsis for the Haunted Carousel mystery. A newspaper reporter challenges Nancy to solve a weird mystery involving an amusement park merry-go-round. Why does the carousel light up in the middle of the night and begin revolving and playing music when no one's around? In search of an answer, Nancy finds herself matching wits with two clever criminals and tries to hunt down one of them in the park's haunted house. Meanwhile, a teenage heiress seeks the young detective's help deciphering a strange flower riddle that her father presented to her just before he died. The plot thickens when a woman who may hold a vital clue to the mystery suddenly disappears. With the help of her friend Ned, Nancy sets out to catch the sinister culprits, but discovers too late that she and Ned are the ones really caught in a trap. And now for a dramatically read newspaper headline synopsis. She doesn't horse around. Nancy Drew solves carousel mystery, uncovers stolen diamonds. Okay, so now let's jump into some of the direct quotes and notes that I took down for the Haunted Carousel. So our story starts with Nancy, Bess, and George hanging out in Riverside Park, where there are amusement park rides, and taking Bess and George's relatives, the Custer children, around. So everyone in the town supposedly has this haunted carousel on their minds, and it's got everyone in River Heights buzzing, because according to reports, a carousel has been turning on at random times and lighting up and playing music when no one else is around in the middle of the night. I mean, that is kind of odd. It could be an electrical malfunction, though. I don't know why everyone jumps to a haunting automatically, but I'm sure Nancy will disprove it. But Nancy and the Custer children are talking about it when this reporter, Rick Jason, comes up and he challenges Nancy to solve the mystery. And Nancy says she usually only solves mysteries to help people. I guess she's just letting him know, like, I don't like to take bets or anything like that, but Rick says that he'll accept Nancy's terms. So after thinking for a minute, Nancy says that if the River Heights News will offer all the kids in River Heights a free day in the amusement park, she'll take on the challenge and try to solve the mystery. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is really nice of Nancy to do that, and I doubt that the River Heights News would pay her to solve a mystery, but I still just, like, in my mind, I really want Nancy to get paid to do what she does, because, like, I don't know, it makes me think maybe there's a possibility, like, maybe there's somebody out there that would pay me to solve mysteries. I mean, you know, probably just a fantasy, but it would be cool. It could happen. So Nancy and this reporter basically shake on it and they accept the terms of the challenge. And right after this, Nancy notices a Swiss couple that they met at the cotton candy machine earlier in the day. Their names are the Tromples, and they seem really, really upset. And according to the book, they're visiting America on their honeymoon, which I just found this very funny. Like, who knew that River Heights was such a tourist destination? But anyways, it appears their wallet has been pickpocketed, so Nancy offers to help them find it. Now, this next note that I wrote down is just an inconsistency, a mistake that I found in the book, which kind of blew my mind because I feel like the original 56 books, we didn't see mistakes like this. I think the paperback books, it was a transition period for Stratemeyer Syndicate. They went from being published with Grosset and Dunlap to being published with Simon & Schuster, so maybe that would explain this little mistake, but on page 1 it says Conrad Tromple and his wife Judy, and then on the very next page it's been changed to Trudy. So this is the mystery of who is Conrad Tromple actually married to, Judy or Trudy. I thought this was kind of bad to change a character's name so entirely, and it's not even a page apart. Like, you can look at the book with it open and it's like, well, there it says Judy and there it says Trudy, so which one is it? Don't worry, I'll at least solve that mystery in just a second, but back to the story. So anyways, Nancy helps the Tromples, explaining that pickpockets usually work in teams. Like, Nancy has some extensive knowledge on this. She's like, oh yeah, it wasn't just one person, it was probably 2 or 3 people. So she says someone usually distracts their target that they're pickpocketing, and then someone pickpockets them, and there's usually a third person who takes the loot and goes off somewhere and looks to see what they've got. So Nancy, Bess, George, and the Custer children split up and find Mr. Tromple's wallet in a trash can. And Nancy asks some workers at a nearby hot dog stand if they saw anyone throw something strange in the trash cans, and one guy says he saw someone toss a wallet, and he gives a description of the man. And according to him, the man had longer hair. So Mr. Tromple also recalls being bumped into by a bald man in a checked suit. So now we have a description of at least 2 of the pickpockets, and we're kind of putting together the framework and how this could have happened. So Nancy and her gang of Bess and George and these little kids, the Custer children, find the 2 men talking near the shooting gallery, and Nancy sees a man in a red polo shirt approaching the crooks, and she puts 2 and 2 together that he's involved. I just love the fact that Nancy is the queen of multitasking. Like, here she is babysitting these kids at this amusement park, and she's also like, let's go catch these bad guys. That seems like a super safe afternoon activity. So anyways, Nancy confronts the man in the red polo shirt, but is then surrounded by the other two crooks. And luckily, the police show up, though, and they chase them off. But thanks to Nancy yelling and calling attention to the theft, the man throws the Tromples' money down, and they get it back. This made me think of, I believe her name is Monica Poli. She went viral on TikTok and Instagram for calling out pickpocketing in Italy. The lady that's like, attenzione, pickpocket. And I just love it. Like, I love that Nancy caught these guys. And I love that that woman does that. Like, she is doing a public service, because there is nothing worse than a thief. But the next note that I wrote down is, I guess it's Trudy Tromple and not Judy, because I saw that name again for Miss Tromple. Instead of saying Miss Tromple, they said Trudy. So it was just weird that they made that much of a mistake in this book. So after all that excitement is over and the Tromples get all their money back, Nancy and the girls watch the Custer kids ride the carousel, which is called the Wonderland Gallop. And Nancy decides that she's going to talk to the carousel owner, whose name is Leo Novak. And he says he has no clue why the carousel has been turning on by itself in the middle of the night, because the machinery is all working. And he says that the carousel was in River Heights originally 8 years ago, then it was bought and moved to the Midwest before he bought it and brought it back to River Heights again. And I think this is a pretty common fate for a lot of carousels. Like, there's actually a carousel that I've ridden in Chattanooga. It's down in this park near the riverfront, and if I remember correctly, it has a plaque that says it originally came from New York. So it's not uncommon for carousels to get moved around to like malls and different places, parks, just wherever somebody wants one, I guess. So Nancy and the girls finish up at the park for the day because they're going to be watching the Custer children overnight on a houseboat that their dad rented, because they rode it downriver to River Heights for their vacation, which, I mean, I guess that's a cool vacation. That sounds kind of fun. But as the group is heading over to the houseboat, they see a man's shadow on board and everyone gets scared. So Nancy and George arm themselves with a rock and a tree branch, and they tell Bess to stay with the children while they make sure that the boat is safe and intruder-free. So it's while Nancy and George are devising a plan and sneaking on board that someone yells boo, and it turns out to be Ned. And I just said, thank goodness it wasn't an actual villain, because we've already dealt with a few of those today. But just like, geez, like why would Ned do this? Like, that's so not cool. So Ned says that he wasn't intending to scare them, but he was actually coming to see if he and Nancy could go on a date tonight instead of tomorrow, because he has to go back to Emerson. Okay, wasn't intending to scare them. Like, you jumped out and you screamed boo. And like, Nancy and George had a rock and a tree branch. They were like arming themselves and preparing to deal with the worst. So I don't know if I buy that. But Nancy agrees to go on a date with him, and she leaves the babysitting to Bess and George, and she and Ned run back to her house so she can change. So it turns out that Ned has made them reservations at some place called Rustler's Inn, and it must be Western themed, because the book says Ned is wearing a checkered shirt, and Nancy puts on a checkered shirt and ties a bandana around her neck. Yeehaw. I think I discussed this in a previous episode, but what is with all the theme restaurants in River Heights? Like, we don't have cool theme restaurants where I live, and I kind of want some. Like, the only place that I can think of that we used to have was this place where you would throw peanuts on the floor, which as a kid, that seemed really, really cool to me, but now as an adult, I'm like, that's a bit of a health code violation. Like, that's probably so nasty. Plus, it's not very themed. It's just like, hey, we're gonna throw stuff on the floor. Like, I think it'd be cool if we had like a Western themed place, or I don't know. I'm not good at coming up with ideas, but if you're local to the East Tennessee area, you heard it here first. We need really cool themed restaurants. Somebody get on that. So while at the restaurant, Ned asks Nancy to promise that she won't investigate the carousel late at night by herself, and Nancy says, maybe you're right, but doesn't really promise anything. So do you see what Nancy just did there? Loophole. She's like, well, I didn't tell Ned outright that I won't investigate late at night. So they go see a horror movie after they finish dinner, and then they run by Nancy's house to get sweaters because it's gotten cooler outside, and then Ned goes to get his night night binoculars at his house so they could do some amusement park surveillance. I just wrote down that I did think it was funny how Ned talks about the night vision binoculars. Like, first of all, I don't know why he has them, but he says they're used by the Navy and Coast Guard. Well, what's good enough for the Navy and Coast Guard is good enough for Ned Nickerson, I guess. But as far as we've been led to believe in the series, Ned just sells insurance on the side, so why does he need night binoculars? Is he a spy or something? Is there something that we need to know that he's not telling us? So Nancy and Ned stake out the carousel and eventually spot two figures sneaking around on it in the dark, messing with the carousel horses, when suddenly it lurches on. So the lights pop on, the guys that are snooping around on the carousel get scared off, and Nancy and Ned take off after the men and soon get separated in the dark amongst the amusement park rides. So Nancy gets worried and she starts calling for Ned, and she finds him unconscious on the ground in the middle of the midway, and one of the bad guys knocked him out. So Nancy helps him up and they leave since the men got away. This was really scary though, because I don't know, I've never been in an amusement park when it's pitch black and dark, everything's turned off and nobody's there, but I would think that that would be really, really creepy. And then also the fact that Nancy's going against her better judgment and trying to yell for Ned but not call attention to herself, because I mean the bad guys could come after her next, but that kind of gave me the chills. So the next day, Hannah shows Nancy her picture and an article about her trying to solve the carousel mystery that has popped up in the local newspaper, and she also says that someone named Joy Trent called and she wants Nancy to solve a mystery for her. Whenever Nancy gets any kind of news coverage in this book series, she's always embarrassed. She's always like, oh, I don't want to be in the newspaper, or I don't want my picture taken, or anything like that. She's always appropriately modest about it. I guess you could say that that's kind of a trope within the Nancy Drew series also. So after talking to Hannah, Nancy and Bess eat breakfast at the Drews' house, and then they go back to the amusement park where they're met by a police officer who helped them with the pickpockets the day before, and his name is Officer Doyle. So Officer Doyle introduces them to Detective Mike Norris, who says that the pickpockets are actually well-known fugitives, and their names, get this, are Fingers Malone and Baldy Krebs. Like, how did the people come up with the names for the bad guys in this series? Because they're so awful. I guess Baldy Krebs is called that because he's bald. It's a descriptor, but then Fingers Malone, I'm assuming that's because of his pickpocketing prowess, but it's just, they're so weird. They're such weird names. So after speaking with the detectives, Nancy talks to this man named Arno Franz, who knows a lot of history on carousels, and he talks about lead horses and how they're more ornately decorated than the rest of the horses on the carousel, and he says he has a theory, and he thinks that the lead horse on the Wonderland Gallop carousel has been replaced. Now, they talk about this a lot more in the Nancy Drew computer game, The Haunted Carousel, which I thought was really, really cool. That's a really fun game, and I'll have to let you know at the end of this episode if I like the book more than the game, but they talk about lead horses and the history of the design of carousels, which is really fun. So after this, Nancy and Bess walk around the amusement park and they spot Fingers Malone. And they were warned by the detectives. They're like, hey, these guys are bad. They're shady characters. You don't need to be around them. If you see them, let us know. But Nancy chases him into the haunted house, loses sight of him, and then sees him again as she's falling through a trap door. So Nancy gets knocked out by Fingers Malone from behind and then comes to in the company of the police officer and detective who don't believe that she saw him. They're like, no, we would have known if you'd seen Fingers Malone. And they go talk to Bess, who was standing watch outside the haunted house, and she says she never saw Fingers Malone come out. So he's not inside because they searched and he didn't come out, so where did he go? Now later after this happens, when Nancy, Bess, and George discuss the case over lunch, Nancy says she'd like to find an engineer to check out the carousel and see if maybe they can tell her why it keeps turning on randomly. So George says she knows a guy whose name is Neil Sawyer, and Bess kind of hints to the fact that Neil has a crush on George, and George just kind of blushes and dismisses this, but she does call Neil Sawyer and he says he'll help and look the carousel over for them. It's also kind of funny because at this point in the mystery, Bess randomly just mentions that she watched a movie where some burglars would set a fire in another building to distract from a robbery they were committing somewhere else, and Nancy wonders if maybe that's why the carousel keeps coming on. It's a distraction. So while the carousel is on, people are looking at that while something else more sinister is going on somewhere else. So Nancy goes to see Chief McGinnis next and asks if he can give her a call log of when the carousel has come on and if there have been any crimes committed nearby around the same time. So he says he'll look into it and call Nancy back. So after Nancy leaves the police station and she goes home, she's told by Hannah that she just missed Joy Trent again. And Joy told Hannah to ask Nancy to call her tomorrow. And according to Hannah, Joy has red hair and one green eye and one brown one. I think that is called heterochromia. My rabbit Reese actually has that. She has one brown eye and one blue eye. So in other words, Joy Trent is really distinctive looking and it would be hard to miss her. So Nancy next finally gets to talk to Neil Sawyer, the engineer that George knows, at Bess and George's family cookout, and he says that he thinks someone has been using radio technology to turn the carousel on and off. So they would have to be somewhat close within the area, but they wouldn't have to be like right next to the carousel to turn it on and off. So Nancy files this away, and later she tries to call Joy, but there's this rude woman who answers the phone and says that Joy isn't there and Nancy will have to call back. So deciding to work on something else in the meantime, Nancy goes to the amusement park again and she sees a well-dressed woman talking to the carousel owner, Leo Novak. And this woman seems agitated and hands Leo something that looks like an article and writes something on it. And Nancy notices also at this time that Leo is wearing an eye patch but doesn't want to talk about it. Something tells me he's not taking up the profession of a part-time pirate, so either he got hurt or someone hurt him and he has a black eye or something. Also, try saying that 4 times fast. Part-time professional pirate, part-time professional pirate, part-time professional pirate. So Nancy and Ned go grab lunch after this at some place called Limehouse Tavern, which is a British pub. Again, super cool. Wish we had one of those in my area. And Ned says that a professor of his talked about this famous artist named Walter Cruz, who used to have a girlfriend whose father owned the carousel. So Walter Cruz kind of reminds me of Rolf Kessler in the Haunted Carousel computer game. So that may be where the inspiration came from. They just changed the name. So after this, Nancy finally talks to Joy Trent for a little while, and she wants Nancy to come to her house. She must have this feeling like she can't talk over the phone with Nancy about aspects of the case. So Nancy talks to Leo Novak, the owner of the carousel again, and he says that he remembers the girl whose father owned the carousel, Nina Ogden, and he says that the lead horse was replaced because it broke. So this kind of fits in with the theory that Arno Franz had, the expert on carousels, that said he thought that the lead horse on the Wonderland Gallop had been replaced too. So Leo just confirmed that. Now, directly after this, Nancy gets another phone call from Joy Trent, who says that her house was broken into. So Nancy hasn't even made it to Joy's house yet, and it's been broken into. But after this, Nancy talks to Chief McGinnis again, who says that a burglary did occur around the same time that the carousel came on, but a call came in with a tip about the burglary before it happened. So that's really weird and suspicious. I mean, most of the time when people call the police, it's like because a burglary is in process or someone comes home and they find that there's been a burglary. Nobody calls to report a burglary before it happens. It's a bit like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure, like, I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence. I mean, nobody's gonna believe you. I mean, maybe somebody could have a change of heart, but it's like, why do you have this insider information? So Nancy finally goes to see Joy Trent, and on her way up the driveway, the woman who was talking to Leo at the park, the one that was really upset and handed him the article, passes in her car. And when Nancy meets Joy's aunt and says she's sorry she cut her friend's visit short, Joy's aunt gets mad and says that that woman is not her friend. So there's some drama there. We're going to figure out more about that later. But Joy's aunt's name is Selma Yawley, and she's less than friendly with Nancy and leaves once Joy gets home. And Joy tells Nancy that 2 burglars broke in through a basement window of their house and subdued her butler. But to Joy's knowledge, nothing was taken, which is really weird because, by the way, Joy is super rich. She's an heiress to this fortune that was once her father's. I mean, she has a butler, okay? So she's pretty well off. But the fact that these people didn't take anything is really weird. But Joy also mentions that she thinks she was followed home the day before by someone in a dark blue car. So while Nancy and Joy are kind of getting to know each each other, Joy tells Nancy that her father passed away a few months ago, leaving her everything, and she's under the guardianship of her aunt. And she doesn't remember much about her mother. And Nancy takes this time to apologize because she saw Joy waving at her the other day at the amusement park, but Nancy was kind of preoccupied. She was chasing Fingers Malone into the haunted house, so she couldn't really stop and say hi. But Nancy and Joy talk some more about the amusement park, and Joy says that her father bought her the lead carousel horse years ago. And Joy says that she's lent the horse to the River Heights Daycare Center. So finally, at this point in the conversation, Joy tells Nancy about the mysterious riddle that her dad left her, the reason why she contacted Nancy. And the note says Iris equals ? Equals Old Glory. And Iris was Joy's mother's name. So Joy says she doesn't even have a picture of her late mother, which is really, really sad. And this is also mentioned in the Haunted Carousel game. But Nancy takes note of the fact that Joy's late father decorated with a lot of iris pieces around the house. There's a picture of an iris on the wall, and there's irises in vases around the house. So Nancy can tell that Joy's father really cared for her late mother. So after talking to Joy, Nancy goes to talk to Leo Novak again, the carousel owner, and asks why he said the lead horse on the carousel was replaced due to damage when really Joy's father bought it for her. So he basically lied, and Nancy caught him in that lie. So Leo says he didn't lie, and most recently the lead horse was damaged. So he kind of told a little bit of a white lie and omitted some of the truth. But what would motivate him to do that? So Nancy next goes to talk to Mr. March, who says that 2 men tried to steal his boat one night around the same time that the carousel lit up. And this is the robbery that Chief McGinnis was talking about. And Nancy decides to see if the police can look for fingerprints on the boat, but I don't know why they hadn't already done that. That seems kind of like standard procedure, but whatever, correct me if I'm wrong. But Mr. March got his boat back from the police, so Nancy's having to tell them to do their job once again. Now, after this happens, Nancy gets a mysterious call from the woman she saw leaving the Trent's house, the one that Joy's aunt said was not her friend, and she asks Nancy to meet her at the Romany tea room, and she agrees. And this woman doesn't give Nancy her name. She asks her to deliver some flowers to Joy, and I just put no, red flag. It would bother me so much if someone didn't introduce themselves or make their intentions clear, and they were just making demands of me. I would not do what they said. But Nancy is way too nice, and she agrees and takes the floral arrangement to Joy. And it's an iris arrangement, and it has a note that says, if you care to get in touch with me, call the Regent Hotel and ask for Rose Herod in room 922. So Joy does show interest, but her aunt forbids her from contacting the woman. Now, Joy is 17 in this book, I believe. She's a year younger than Nancy, who's always portrayed as being 18. She's old enough to make her own decisions, and she and her aunt argue about this, and Joy says that she may not be her guardian until she's 21. So there's some tension there. I think that Joy's aunt is very much wanting to exert control over Joy, probably because she is loaded and has a lot of money. That may be part of it, but it's just Joy can make these decisions on who she wants to talk to or not talk to, unless perhaps her aunt feels threatened by the fact that she wants to talk to this woman, which kind of makes me think that this woman directly puts Joy's aunt's guardianship over her in jeopardy. So when Nancy gets home, she talks to her dad about Joy's guardianship, and he says that he knows her lawyer, Fred Trimble, and says he'll talk to him and sound out the situation to kind of get a feel for the inner workings of how Joy's guardianship actually works. So next, Nancy, Bess, and George go have a slumber party on the houseboat, and I just put, man, I miss my teenager days when I would go to sleepovers. Those were so fun. But in the middle of the night, Nancy wakes up and realizes that the boat has come unmoored from the dock and another boat is bearing down on them. So they barely avoid a collision in this houseboat, and the other boat captain safely tows them back to the dock, thankfully. But Nancy and George notice something else that's scary. The rope that was tying their boat to the dock was deliberately cut, so it was no accident. Also, that was another almost boating accident, so you know what that means. Oh, look, another boating mishap within a Nancy Drew book. So after this, Nancy ends up getting the phone number of Joy's lawyer from her dad, Carson, and she goes to lunch with Mr. Trimble, and he says that he thinks Joy's father made provisions for the guardianship of Joy's aunt to end amid certain circumstances, but he can't really say more because he can't legally do that. He's like, I can't tell you all the ins and outs because I would lose my job. But after this meeting, Nancy talks to Chief McGinnis again, and he says they found Baldy Krebs and Fingers Malone's fingerprints on the boat, and he also gets Nancy Detective Norris's phone number, and Nancy asks him if the thieves primarily operate out of theme parks, and he says yes, they do. So what are they looking for at amusement parks? Now, after this, Nancy goes to see Joy, who tells her she's going to get in contact with Rose Herod no matter what her aunt thinks. And Nancy tells Joy that she thinks she may understand part of John Trent's riddle, the one that was like Iris and Old Glory and the question mark. And she points to a Civil War painting. And there's a flagstaff in the painting, and it's pointing towards an iris on a bookshelf. And there have been references to the American flag being called Old Glory. So that's a pretty good hint. And later, Nancy and Joy go to see her carousel horse, which also happens to be named Old Glory. And it's at the daycare center, and after that, Nancy remembers that irises are also called flags. So Nancy pulls at a flag being held by a small statue figurine, and a piece of tissue paper comes out with a picture of a horse on it, and there's a frog riding in its saddle. Now, okay, if you've ever played Secret of Shadow Ranch, I think you know where this is going, but Nancy doesn't just yet. So Nancy goes to the library and she reads up on Walter Cruz, calls the River Heights Art Museum, and then the reporter Rick Jason, who asks how the mystery solving is coming along. So she asks him for a favor to run a story on Joy's carousel horse in the paper, and she also asks if he can get his connections at the TV station to also run a story. So Nancy's plotting and scheming on how to trap these bad guys. So next, Nancy and Bess go to the amusement park, and Nancy has Bess pace around the carousel like she's waiting for someone and talk to Leo Novak. And Bess tells him Nancy almost has the mystery solved and has found the original carousel horse, and he gets really nosy about it. He's like, oh, well, what do you mean? Where is the original carousel horse? How did she find it? Where is it now? And Bess is just kind of vague about it. Now, Nancy, Bess, and Ned next follow the lead about Rose Herod, the woman that contacted Joy, and they go to her hotel, and the clerk finds her room key along with a note behind the desk, and he says he didn't write it, but the note says, if Nancy Drew or Joy Trent phone or come to the hotel, please tell them I had to go to the airport, but we'll be back shortly. And the clerk says it must have been left the day before, and Nancy becomes concerned. So Nancy and Ned wait so they can talk to the hotel clerk that actually took the message the day before, and he says that Miss Herod got a call from a man, which she took at the front desk, and the man asked her to meet him at the airport in a cafe to talk about Joy, and Miss Herod agreed to go. So Nancy and Ned next go to the airport cafe, and they talk to a waitress who says she remembers Miss Herod coming in, and she says she did meet a man, they talked, and at first they looked happy, but then she started to look very sick, and Nancy wonders if she was drugged. So she and Ned also talk to a parking attendant who says that he saw Miss Herod get in a car with two strange men, and when the attendant tried to ask if she was okay, one of the men had said he was a doctor and he was going to take her to the hospital, but the attendant says the man drove a shabby black car, which he didn't think a doctor would drive, so he took down the license plate number. Way to go. This parking attendant is in his own right a detective, because that was great that he took down the license plate number. So Nancy gives the tag number to Chief McGinnis, and he calls back later in the day and says the car was reported stolen and found abandoned in a town called Fishwick. So Nancy and Ned go there and talk to a man at a gas station who says he saw two men and a woman go into a cottage. So Nancy and Ned go find where these cottages are, and they go knock on the door and hear a muffled sound inside. So Ned busts the door open and sees Rose Herod tied up and on the floor, and Nancy and Ned save her and take her to the hospital. This is just terrifying, that this woman was drugged, that she was abducted. Like, if this were to happen today, the story would have ended probably a little bit differently, which is just, ugh, it just is scary to think about. But thankfully, we're talking about a Nancy Drew book, and all is right in the world of Nancy Drew. So at this point in the mystery, Nancy is trying to set a a trap for the burglars who broke into Joy's house. So Nancy and Ned are working with the police and Rick, Jason, and a few other people in the local news media. So just as Nancy had predicted, the carousel comes on at night after the news report has been run about Joy's carousel horse. And so Leo Novak comes running, and the police have him turn out his pockets, and lo and behold, he has a radio relay device, and he's the one who's been turning on the carousel at night. So after he's apprehended, Nancy then hears from Ned on a walkie-talkie and goes to meet him at the daycare center where two men are trying to break in. So Nancy and Ned sneak in and watch the two men near the carousel horse, but Ned leans too far on a chair and knocks it over. So what ensues next is a fight between the bad guys and Nancy and Ned. And Nancy actually takes a child-sized chair and starts hitting one of the men with it. Give him the chair, Nancy! So another man joins the brawl and helps Nancy and Ned, and it turns out to be Mr. Franz, the carousel expert, who is actually an insurance investigator. Like, he's just an insurance investigator. Okay, he comes and helps save the day, and Baldy Krebs and Fingers Malone are now incapacitated and on the floor, so the police arrest them. And after all this goes down, Nancy invites everyone of interest, Joy and her aunt, Bess and George, Rick, Jason, and some others to the daycare the next day to explain everything. So Nancy explains that Walter Cruz helped Fingers Malone hide some diamonds that he stole in the carousel horse, and Nancy opens up the frog of the carousel horse's foot and she finds the diamonds and a letter from Joy's dad to her. So basically, John Trent married Iris, but she became sick after Joy was born, and Iris's parents never approved of her marrying John, who was then poor and hadn't made his riches yet. So he had to ask her parents for help with her medical issues, and they only agreed to it if he left Iris, which is so messed up on many, many levels. But John agreed because he loved Iris and he took Joy with him. So Rose Herod, the lady that was trying to meet Joy earlier in the book, she turns out to be Joy's aunt and Iris's twin sister. So naturally, Joy's aunt Yali is mad because Joy wants Rose to be her guardian instead, which explains why she didn't want Joy to talk to her. But since Rose Herod was a twin to Joy's mom, it's like Joy gets to see her mom again in a way, just through her sister. So that's kind of a sad but also happy ending to this story, and that's it. That's the end of the book. So now let's go on to a little segment that I like to call What's Cooking. So in this book, we got to see Nancy enjoy several different kinds of meals. She had salads and steaks, apple pie and coffee, waffles with blueberry syrup and sausage, salad and sandwiches, lemon chiffon pie, fish and chips, tea and sandwiches, cocoa, eggs Benedict, and shrimp cocktail. Now onto the things that I think that Nancy could add to her resume. So I said that Nancy is a season pass holder because she went to that amusement park so many times. And she could also be a WWE champion because she literally was hitting that bad guy with a chair, and it was making me laugh. Now let's talk about the things that I liked and didn't like about the Haunted Carousel. So I liked the amusement park setting. I thought that was really cool. The things I didn't like, the Custer children, like, I don't know. They were kind of in part of the story and then they were gone for the rest of the story, and I don't know, it just kind of felt like we needed an excuse to go to an amusement park, and I'm like, Nancy, Bess, and George can go to an amusement park on their own. So if I had to give this book a magnifying glass rating, I would probably give it a 2.5. It wasn't my favorite, and if I had to pick between the book and the game, I think that the Haunted Carousel game is way better than the book. So that concludes today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. For next week's episode, we're going to be jumping into another book called Enemy Match. So if you like tennis champions and Nancy having an assistant, no really, she has a little assistant in this book, then you won't want to miss this episode. Until next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of True Drew Podcast. Can't get enough of the podcast? Then check out my subscription series, True Drew Files, available on Apple and Spotify. For Nancy Drew books and merchandise, you can check out my website, www.truedrewpodcast.com. For business inquiries, you can contact me at truedrewpodcast@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram at True Drew Podcast.